I hope the microphone picked that up. This will make sense later, but I'm pouring it now because I want it to breathe while I'm talking. Hello, and welcome to another Oki Solo Channel YouTube video. So today I wanted to talk about beverages that were culturally relevant to the American Revolution. So the release of this is going to be on Independence Day, and I had quick two things that I wanted to share. One, I think it's really kind of weird that Independence Day is on July 4th, given that's only when the Continental Congress agreed that the Declaration of Independence is what we wanted to sign. And then because it wasn't signed until almost a month later. So you could argue that's a better date to do Independence Day on. And then it's also kind of weird to me that we treat it like it's the anniversary of this country, given that the Constitution wasn't ratified until June 21st, 1788. Either way, but when you say beverage and American Revolution, I think most Americans immediately jump to the Boston Tea Party, and they're like, the tea is this really big thing. But yes, it was a factor, but I would argue that rum was a much bigger deal at this time. We really underappreciate how much rum American colonists were drinking at this time. The lowest estimate I could find, now keep in mind these are estimates, is that on average every man, woman, and child in these colonies was drinking 4 gallons of rum per year. That works out to almost 20 bottles of rum for every American. Now, keep in mind that's an estimate. Keep in mind that's an average. So there are some people bringing it up. There are some people who aren't drinking at all. But needless to say, there was a lot of rum being consumed in the colonies. And so it factored very heavily into the culture of the time. Rum was the first big industry of the American colonies. A really common way that this worked out was a distillery in New England would import French molasses from one of the French colonies in the Caribbean. They would ferment, distill, and then they would sell it into the taverns around there, or maybe they owned the tavern, and so there was a lot of money to be made there. And in the 1730s, 80% of the American colonial exports was rum. Right, big deal. So if you're looking at policy around this time in the British Empire, the policy was that the colonies existed to funnel money to the homeland, I guess. And so the fact that the American colonies were becoming so self-sufficient and so capable of producing their own commerce, Parliament and the royalty, they decided that they should impose some tariffs, I think that would be the modern term, on it. And so they passed the Molasses Act of 1733. And it basically, I think it was a 6 pence tax per every gallon of molasses. And the thing that's really funny about that is basically the majority of colonists said, that's dumb, I'm not paying that, go to hell. And there wasn't really a good way to enforce it because, these colonies are on the other side of the world, and there wasn't really a strong military presence. And so, due to a combination of smuggling, people not enforcing it, and people not wanting to pay it, because they were that's stupid, it just kind of didn't happen. And it didn't switch around until, if you're British, you call it the 7 Years' War. If you're American, you call it the French and Indian War. But that war ended up costing a lot of money for the British. So they decided we need to get some revenue up in this joint to try and pay back some of this debt we've accrued. And to be fair, and I will give them this, the Americans very clearly started that war. The British Parliament and the royalty were please don't start anything. We don't want to get into another war with the French. And the Americans said, hold my rum, and went for it anyways. And I just think that's so funny because then the solution they came up with was the Sugar Act of 1764. 1764, and this was a lower tax, but it was more enforceable. And this was just unbearable to a lot of Americans. You can actually document it, a lot of distillers were actually people leading cries along the lines of like no taxation without representation, and they led boycotts on a lot of British imports. And so this just like kind of like really started upheavaling things, and then like you get things like the Stamp Act and like yada yada yada, all these other things that just kept stacking until Americans just decided they had enough of this completely unfair, what they felt was unfair relationship. Fairness is a subjective thing. I'm not making a commentary thing. I'm just trying to use the word properly. And so they fought this entire revolution, and rum still played a big role in it. So George Washington, if you didn't know this, was a huge fan of rum. He thought it was important for morale and XYZ. So like a typical ration per day for someone in the Continental Army was a gill of rum, which roughly is like, I think it's 4 ounces. And now, I'm not going to get into like supply lines, XYZ, whether or not that like happened every day, but the fact that they had written down on paper that this was like part of their pay is, again, indicative of the American culture of rum. And then, like after the revolution, rum started like being less chill, because at some point we figured out how to make our own bourbons and whiskeys and like rye whiskey. And we got really into that. And honestly, rum doesn't really come back into American culture until, I get this is way after the revolution, but I'm talking about rum now, and I'm going to do what I want to talk about. Until Prohibition. And so rum kind of came back into the fore of American drinking, because around that time, the easiest accessible legal drinking for a significant percentage of the American population during Prohibition was to take a quick ferry ride to Cuba and have some Cuban rum. And that's when we get introduced to daiquiris, mojitos, and stuff like that. And so like after Prohibition, we bring that back. And so like even though rum disappeared from like being like the greatest spirit of America for like 100 years, it comes back, and it's like it's still playing second fiddle to a lot of other things. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about rum, display some of my bottles that I enjoy, just because I think arguably rum is the spirit of the American Revolution, and I think on Independence Day we should take an opportunity to appreciate that if we're choosing a drink to have. And I specifically chose this one because George Washington specifically requested rum punch made from premium Barbados rum for drinking and consuming at his presidential inauguration in 1789. And given that this is like a celebration of like American independence, XYZ, I felt I didn't make a rum punch. This is my favorite bottle of rum. I have never been able to find a second bottle of it. Here's to you, George Washington, the first American president and the guy who set the precedent that the office of the executive branch should not be for life, and you can make of that what you will, but here's to you, George Washington. Anyways, drink responsibly, stay safe on your Independence Day, and hey, maybe if you want to read about the history of rum, check out the book And a Bottle of Rum. I'm blanking on the author's name. I'll flash it on screen, but stay safe out there. Don't blow up your fingers. But yeah, I hope this was a fun video.